Welcome to the channel, friends. So today's video is going to cover tips on operating a kinetic type wood splitter more effectively. Now this applies to the DR RapidFire wood splitters as well as other brands and models of wood splitter. I'm just going to share with you guys some things I've learned over the past few years while operating this type of wood splitter. So if this is going to interest you, stay tuned and I hope you enjoy the video. Alright, so welcome back. Here is the DR RapidFire. As you can see, the covers are off the machine because I was doing some maintenance and lubrication, and I covered that in the previous video. That was part 3. This being part 4, I will go over tips and tricks in operating a kinetic type wood splitter versus a hydraulic type. So these kind of tips are going to be tailored to this machine and other machines just like it out there. So as you can see, the flywheels are exposed here and you can see the internal mechanism. There's a lot of components in here versus a hydraulic type splitter. There's a lot of nuts and bolts and brackets and pivot points and bearings and rack and pinion system that drives the ram. So there's a lot more components, but the kinetic type splitter is a very fast splitting machine. It cannot be compared to any hydraulic when it comes to speed. So even though it has a single wedge versus like some hydraulic splitters will have a dual or like quadruple wedge on there splitting at the same time, this still I think has the advantage of just being super quick. It's like it says, rapid fire. It's lightning fast when it comes in and just splits that wood. So with that being said, let's get into my list of 10 tips for the DR and other kinetic type wood splitters. So let's start with first the belts. So keeping proper tension on the belts, that way you have no slippage. This is very important. So this has a new set of belts on it now and they're nice and tensioned. That's done by adjusting the platform on the motor to give it more tension. But these offer more grip now versus my older belts that I had on that I just changed out. They were stretched out and kind of loose. That's something I did not notice, and I've been using this for the past few years in that same way. So I did encounter some slippage when I tried to split larger diameter wood, like 20 inches or larger. The belt would squeal and the ram would just kind of take a couple attempts of splitting to really crack through a larger diameter piece of wood. So I attribute that to possibly the slippage on the belt, which I was not aware of. So if you have this type of machine, it's worth checking out the belts and make sure they're properly tensioned, even if they are somewhat old. That way you'll get better performance out of it and you won't get any belt slippage. Very important. That's number 1. Number 2 will be to scrape the top and bottom of the ram surface here, which is the I-beam, and the bottom of the I-beam for debris and buildup. Just take a kind of a crappy chisel and scrape all of that debris off, because as you lubricate it with white lithium grease, it does build up like a paste and then it hardens on these surfaces, which are free running surfaces. You want them to be clear of all debris for that ram to operate nice and freely and efficiently. You want it to retract back all the way and not get hung up on anything. So that's very important. There's also 2 springs on the back side of the ram, one on each side, that retract the ram back in position. I found out that one spring was actually off the mount, so I was only getting one spring retracting the ram back and it was giving me trouble. So that can be an issue, because if you're not properly level with the machine and you're kind of pitched forward this way, the table pitched down, you'll make it actually harder for the ram to retract back if that spring is off. So I'm glad I found that issue. I took care of that. You just basically take the spring and just hook it back on. Now it fully retracts, which is good. So going on to the next kind of thing I want to touch on, which is number 3, is clean off the work table in the I-beam area constantly with like a small leaf blower, whatever it is, brush. Use something to constantly keep the debris off the area that you're working, because wood chips and dust get all up in these bearings everywhere underneath the ram here, sometimes in between the bottom of the ram and the top of the I-beam, and it will wedge the thing together. So you don't want it binding up. Just as you're working, keep the work table clean, kind of brush off anything, have a brush with you, you know, like a small dustpan and brush, and use that to clean off the machine. I like to use a leaf blower, one of these right here. It's a portable DeWalt, you know, has a 20-volt lithium-ion battery. This thing works great. I can take this thing anywhere. It's nice and compact. I don't have to carry my big backpack blower around. And this works great. You just go around and you'll just blow off everything, and it gets it all nice and clean. So that comes in handy, having a blower. So keeping your area clean is very important with this machine. It'll really help that ram operate properly. Going on to number 4 is right here, this bungee cord. This helps keep the ram out when you're going to lubricate it. So before you start, every time I use my machine, I go ahead and I pull out the ram. So if we can do this just like this. So as you can see here, I have the bungee cord holding the ram outwards, and then now you can come in with your white lithium grease and spray the teeth, the rack and pinion of the machine with proper grease. Instead of holding it out and kind of fidgeting with one hand, this is a better bet. Just hold it out with the bungee cord, and that way you can just spray all the teeth as you need. So this bungee cord here definitely comes in handy. I'll show you another trick as we go along. So number 5 will be what I just talked about, lubing up the rack and pinion with white lithium grease. Having a spout on it just like this WD-40 can is very helpful, because you can spray right up in the teeth and not worry about excess getting places where it should not be. So that covers the quick lubrication that I do every time I use the machine. Okay, so moving on to number 6, which is you want to keep the whole work table and machine level. You're going to be using this on uneven terrain most likely, and you got to keep in mind that this machine operates better when it's level, or if it's tilted back this way. That way the ram is aided in with gravity. So you have the front of the table here lifted higher than the back end of the table. That just helps that ram retract back just that much easier. Not too much of an incline, but essentially you should just keep it level. Level will keep the machine operating like it was designed and operating properly. But sometimes I do like to pitch it backwards like I was talking about, like I have here. Once I have it hooked up to the back of the ATV, the front of the wood splitter is higher, which will give me that natural kind of decline backwards, which will aid, like I said, in keeping the logs on the workspace and helping that retract back just in case it decides to hang up because of debris. So that's always good to keep in mind. You want to keep it level. So moving on to the next one, which is number 7. Number 7 is these marks right here. So you can split up to 25.5 inches the way you see it here. So from here to the wedge sharp point is 25.5. These marks are for my wood stoves. So one is 18 inches from the wedge, and then the other is 19.5 from the wedge. So I have 2 wood stoves, and I just want to get maximum size wood as I'm splitting it. So I can If I have a piece of wood that's larger than this, I can put it aside and cut that shorter at a later date. So it just helps sorting the firewood as I'm going, like a visual indicator, whether the piece of wood is under 18 or just under 19 and a half for my own application. You can do this to any size you want. You can have 20 inches, 21, and you can mark it out here on the I-beam if you need to. But I just need some kind of visual indicator to help me gauge how long my firewood is as I'm going along, just to save time. So I find that very handy. I don't see any people doing it. I think this is something that's novel to my idea. So I really like that. It helps out a lot, especially if you have more than one wood stove that you're feeding and they are different sizes. Moving on to number 8 is keeping the wedge sharp. You can take a file, take a stone, a grindstone, and sharpen your edge on both sides, and also clean up this surface here because that can cause a lot of drag on the wedge as the wood is passing through onto the wedge. So I find that this gets all gummed up with like the tree sap and all the fluid from the tree, and the fibers stick to this. So when you clean this up, this edge here, and sharpen it up, go ahead and just scuff all this up and make sure there's nothing on it, because it will drag on the piece of wood as you're splitting it. So that's easy enough. That's number 8. Moving on to number 9 is the use of a coupler for towing. This comes in handy, especially if you have an ATV. You can just hook it up to your ATV and move this thing around your property. This machine is still kind of heavy to lift up by yourself. So as long as you keep it on a level surface, you'll be okay. You can move this machine around by hand. But once you start going downhill, uphill, you're going to want an ATV because it is kind of heavy. You have 2 75-pound flywheels on top of the rest of the weight of the machine. So it can really, drag you around if you're not careful, if you don't go slow. So I highly recommend attaching this either to your lawnmower or your ATV and towing it around with the addition of some kind of coupler. So moving on to the very last one, which is number 10 here, the use of a bungee cord to hold the safety up. So basically a safety bypass. You do this at your own risk. I go over this on my part 1 video. Basically, the bungee cord holds the handle up on the wood splitter as you're using it permanently. So you wrap this thing around the cover when it's on, and it basically allows you to operate the splitter with one hand. So if you use this method, you're basically bypassing the safety built into the DR. So you do this at your own risk. But this is another way of freeing up one more hand and allowing you to use that other hand to do other things. Like I usually have a picaroon in my hand while I'm splitting wood. So it allows you to free up your hand and to do something more useful with it. So very handy. Always have a bungee cord with you while you're working a KINETIC type wood splitter. It's always worth having. So that's 10 tips and tricks that I have come up with the past few years of using this machine, and it really helps out streamline the workflow and get everything done quickly in a timely manner. So part 5 will be next, which is going to be some slow motion video of the mechanism and the flywheels operating splitting wood. So that's going to be exciting. So I hope you guys will watch that video, and happy splitting. Well guys, that's it for today. I really hope you enjoyed the video, and if you have any questions or comments, please place them right down below. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the channel. I want to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.